Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to ASDC's Thursday Train to Win webinar. Thank you for joining us. Today's topic is hiring and management, and we're pleased to be joined by Bernard Coleman, who's the Director of Human Resources here at the Democratic National Committee. He's going to talk with us about some best practices for scouting talent, for hiring, conducting great interviews, and also management. So this will be a great session. But before we hop in, I just want to remind you of a few housekeeping items. One is, as an attendee to the webinar, you're in listen-only mode. But if you have a question, please feel free to click on the raise my hand icon, or you can type your questions in the questions box. And at the time that we take questions, we'll make sure we get you unmuted or get your questions read from the questions box. Secondly, if you are tracking with us on social media today and you want to tweet during this webinar, please do tweet using the hashtag #TrainToWin, which is our webinar series, and you can also tweet at DemChairs, which is the Association of State Democratic Chairs. So reminders, you're in listen-only mode, but if you have a question, please feel free to click the raise my hand icon, or you can type your questions in the questions box, and we'll make sure that they're read and we'll get them answered for you. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Bernard.
Thank you, Janae, and thank you to the ASDC team for inviting me today to speak with you all. Today's topic of conversation will focus on hiring and management. Specifically, I'll highlight best practices for writing job posts, developing interview questions, avoiding discriminatory interview questions, scouting and selecting the strongest candidates, establishing a team culture, assessing employee performance and performance reviews and metrics, balance and expanding team and team dynamics, and resources related to this presentation that state parties may use in their respective hiring and management processes. So hiring, if it were only that easy, hiring effectively should be a well-planned process in general. Often we focus on speed of getting someone on board without thinking forward as to how a bad hire can create more problems in the future. So you have to think deliberatively. By creating a process for hiring, you can hire high-quality talent quickly and efficiently. So hire. According to dictionary.com, hire is defined as to engage the services of a person or persons for wages or other payment. Well, the hiring process in isolation can be easy. However, finding the best candidate for the job isn't without its challenges. Effective hiring is a multi-tiered effort that requires a well-written job description, advertising, scouting, and selection, and much more. Today, we leave with a better understanding of what is required to ensure that you have the right hire as well as the best team in place for meeting objectives. Before you can even begin the hiring process, it's important to focus on creating the optimum job description for the desired role. The first step is to tailor the job description to your audience. In other words, who are you going after? This is your opportunity to tell all potential applicants the type of person you are looking for. So, you'll need to clearly lay out the specifics. Use specialized wording, i.e. technical jargon. You should be very specific so that you can get the best applicants possible. A job description that is written too broadly can encourage too many applicants who do not have the desired skill set for the role, thus wasting your time. Plainly state the core requirements. At minimum, any person you want to interview should be able to meet the core requirements, so you don't want to understate what you absolutely need. Use keywords. Dynamic wording can attract better applicants and get them excited about the potential of the role. Provide a clear and effective title, or otherwise title consistency. Too many times I've seen job descriptions with titles that are either overly broad or narrow and don't accurately convey what the job entails. I've also seen a job post that's one thing in the header, but a job description that lists an entirely different title, different role. Titles mean a lot to millennials, and in lieu of pay, a great title with challenging work can help you score greater and more qualified applicants. Also, don't forget to describe what's in it for them. Get them excited about the prospect of working for and with you. You want engaged and proactive employees who add to the culture and help you in accomplishing your goals. Catch their attention. It's competitive out there, and many applicants are very talented, and you want them to notice your job post above all others. A well-written job post versus a poorly written job post determines whether you find the talent you desire. First and foremost, a job description is a marketing tool. This is your opportunity not only to find the right candidate, but your chance to highlight your organization, its mission, and why someone will want to work there. Ideally, you can sum up the opening paragraph that captures your organization. So as you write the perfect job description, there are several questions you should ask yourself before you actually post it. Will people respond to the post? Is it effective? Did you write it well? Does it capture everything you want to tell your audience? Did you tell them all the specifics? While the job post should not be overly long, it should tell them what the role entails, the type of culture of the organization, the location, the systems and skills they'll need, etc. If those specifics aren't present, then your job post is not ready for distribution. Does it describe benefits, traditional, non-traditional? This is optional. But so this varies depending on the makeup of your organization, but it is helpful information in attracting the best applicants and preemptively answers any questions potential applicants might have. Does it motivate them to apply for the job? You ultimately want highly qualified people to apply, and you want them to be excited about working at your organization. So remember, you cannot cut corners when you're pulling together a job description. A well-written job description equals higher quality applicants. If the job description is too broad or overly ambiguous, you'll find yourself with a great deal of applicants, albeit underqualified. Professionalism engenders professionalism. When external parties and applicants see the seriousness of the role and the rigor applied in writing the job description, your organization projects professionalism. Applicants who want to work with professionals where they have the opportunity. Applicants want to work with professionals where they have opportunity to learn and grow. A poorly written job description can convey a contrary message and lead potential applicants to look elsewhere. Finally, it's important to share the culture of the organization with the job description. I've interviewed a great deal of people as HR director here at the DNC, and the one consistent result from the interviews is applicants want to work in a collegial and team-oriented environment. It's important to share this attribute and other positive cultural features of your organization so the applicant will be more drawn to working with and for you. Interview 101. So when you prepare to interview, not only are you judging the applicant, they're judging you. The first step in careful preparation allows you to maximize this interview process. So you want to craft effective questions that elicit responses to help you understand the applicant and assess their strengths and weaknesses. Well-crafted questions will greatly aid in determining whether the person makes sense for the role, your team, and the organization on a whole. Interviewing is a two-way process, and you should hone your listening skills as well as be aware of your body language and theirs. Candidates can give away a great deal through their body language in conjunction with their answers. This greatly influences the types of responses you might receive and makes the interview more thorough. But the most important thing is that you have to be actively listening and aware. Finally, make a good impression. People want to work with good people who they ideally like. You're essentially selling the organization, and they're trying to sell you on why they should be there. Also, providing information gives greater insight about the jobs, and benefits can help you win favor with the applicants who have the essential skills that the organization needs. So when I interview applicants, I generally break the interview up into 3 sections. 1, I go over the job description in depth and try to add more meat to the bones because the description is a description, but if I can elaborate on it, I think it helps provide insight to the applicant. I then go over their resume to get a greater feel of who they are, and I refer to notes on their resume that I've noted prior to the interview that I want to talk about and highlight to find out more information. This allows me to understand the applicant better, their job history, and it can prove fruitful in learning more about the applicant. Finally, I ask them about 10 to 20 questions based on how much time I have allotted for the interview. I try to make it a conversation, and I try to be as friendly as possible so the applicant is more at ease. I find that the applicant is more forthcoming with their answers. This isn't an exact science, but you can create a process that makes the most sense for your office. Interview questions. So, before you even begin interviewing, you should develop all your questions that you want to ask of all applicants, per position. I generally like to ask the candidates the same questions as it helps me compare the responses and it helps me winnow the group down to final candidates. Furthermore, it helps ensure fairness and make your final choice. Because ideally, you want to stay away from bias and unevenly applied standards when interviewing folks. Your questions should be a mix, and you generally want to stay away from yes and no questions. Yes and no questions do not further help do not further your understanding of the applicant. I find that open-ended questions are the best and get you considerably more information and makes the interview more of a conversation. A resume and cover letter can only tell you so much, so this is your opportunity to find out as much as you can. These are some behavioral questions that you can aid you in understanding the mindset of the applicant. These are my favorites, actually. Describe an innovative process you proposed for a previous employer. Tell me about one of the toughest groups that you had to work with. What made the group tough? What did you do? You'll find that you can get a lot out of this. Depending on how they respond might determine whether you want them on your team or not. Behavioral questions are great for generating interesting answers, and depending on how the applicant responds, you might understand how they respond to stress, fast-paced environments, how they work with others, and what their ultimate goals are. These are my favorites, as I said, and I find these to be the most fruitful because they're unexpected and require someone to think on their feet. I'll also use this to determine their commitment and whether they're team-oriented. More on interview questions. So if you aren't paying attention right now, I encourage you to tune in right now. Interviewing can be a very interesting process, but you also need to be very careful, especially if you're new to interviewing. Asking the wrong questions will leave you open to a lawsuit. Let's say you're looking at Jane Doe's resume and you see that she went to your alma mater and she's a Girl Scout leader. In your attempt to get to know her better, you say, well, what year did you graduate from college? Do you have any kids? Innocent enough, right? Boom, you just walk into a discrimination lawsuit. It's imperative to remember that you're trying to get to know them better as to how it relates to the position and the final hiring decisions. Going beyond that can land you in trouble. If the applicant doesn't get the job, they may recall the question you asked them and determine that you didn't get hired based on X, Y, and Z. So while your intentions were good, it's ultimately the impact and how they recall the interview going. According to David Curtis, a partner with the Dallas law firm of Gadeer, Wynn, Sewell, inappropriate questions during a hiring are a major source of lawsuits. Most legal questions occur when an employer asks an applicant for information where the answer tends to be from a protected group such as minorities, women, the disabled, legal aliens, and people over 40 years of age, or where the question is not related to essential job functions. The potential legal problems include but are not limited to violations of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and 1991, the Age Discrimination and Employment Act of 1967, and the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1991. So here's some questions to avoid. So you have some examples. I'll read them to you, but just want to illustrate how you can get to something without actually stating it the way you see it in the unacceptable column. So if you're trying to talk to reliability, how many children you have, that's unacceptable. You might want to say, what hours and days can you work? Or attendance, who's going to babysit your kids? Rather than asking that, you could say, are there specific times that you cannot work? Yeah.
Hi everyone, sorry for the interruption if you're still on. We had a computer malfunction, so we'll keep the program rolling.
Sorry folks. So I was just talking about different types of topics that you can talk to and address without saying it in an unacceptable way. So for instance, citizenship, you should never ask anyone, what is your national origin? The way you can go about this is, are you legally eligible for employment in the United States? So you see all these examples here, things to avoid in terms of national origin. Where are your parents from? You don't want to ask that. You want to say, are you legally eligible to work in the United States? So this way you can talk to things without actually saying in an unacceptable form or discriminating against somebody. So, and also I want to note, this is not to be construed as legal advice, but this slide highlights some things that you should avoid asking. As you can see, there are unacceptable and acceptable techniques to find out what you're looking for. Asking discriminatory questions can have serious consequences that can potentially land you in a legal quagmire. So there are a few landmines to avoid when interviewing applicants. Don't make promises you can't keep. Avoid making promises about job security or excessive assurances. If you do so and they're laid off, they may sue for breach of contract. So just be honest. If you think the job will end at a predetermined date, let them know. Most people can handle it and appreciate the honesty. Stay in your lane. Don't make promises or predictions about organizations' budget forecasts or past performance in hopes for the future. So while that you can speak to it a little bit, don't overdo it. You don't want to create an unrealistic expectation by painting yourself into a corner. And finally, don't grossly mischaracterize the job position. So if you hire someone, they accepted the job, but later on they find out they're doing different duties or an entirely different job, employees may have the grounds to sue. Arbitrarily changing the role to another role is disingenuous, and if you're trying to build a culture, you undercut your efforts by misleading potential employees. So while in most instances I don't think most people get litigious, you should generally err on the side of caution and stick with keeping the formalized interview process. This is especially pertinent for new managers or interviewers. Scouting and recruitment. Finding the right person for the job is more than just advertising the position on a listserv or on your website. The more specialized a position, the more difficult it can be to find the ideal candidate for the role. Scouting and recruitment can be tricky, but it doesn't have to be. Finding talent. Finding talent can be a chore, especially if you're short on time. It really comes down to planning and leveraging your network. So leverage your network. Reach out to people you know. Your reach increases exponentially and allows you to find candidates quickly. Cast a large net. Don't limit your search to just traditional channels. If you're looking to get diverse candidates, you can't go to the same sources and expect a different result. Use websites to reach large audiences, and if your budget permits, you can post to pay for sites that can attract better candidates. This is especially important for technical roles. Use referrals. People often know people they will vouch for, and you have a greater confidence in the applicant pool because they come highly recommended. Create a pipeline. You should hang on all the resumes and notes of the people you've interviewed. Just because the person wasn't ideal for the role, they could be good for another role within your organization. A pipeline of applicants who've already been interviewed help in getting qualified people in roles much faster. A pipeline might just be an online folder with all the applicants for certain positions, or if budget permits, a resume bank of tagged resumes. No matter the route, you have a library of candidates that can quickly be considered for other roles. So, what's your target? You need to know the type of person you're looking for. That's why the job description and where you advertise the job is important. It will help you locate the best and brightest folks for the role. I tend to use sites that are Democratic leaning, such as the Manitas List, Democratic Gain, or NOI, which stands for the National Organizing Institute. These sites are free to post, and I know that many Democratic circles peruse those particular sites for jobs. I don't limit my advertisement to just those job sites. If you want to find the best candidates, you'll find that you should look strategically to place job posts to where you think the talent might look themselves. Also, you should have an organizational strategy in place so that all the organization knows the process and how to go about optimizing the process. Finally, employ social media like Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn to let people know that you're looking for talent. Not only is social media free, but the landscape is quite broad. Picking the right person. Picking the right person means you have to effectively weigh all the elements of their qualifications as it relates to the role. I generally ask myself the following questions. Can they perform the core requirements? At a minimum, whoever is the finalist should be able to meet the core requirements laid out in the job description. Anything additional to me is icing. What are their strengths and weaknesses? In business school, we're taught about how to conduct a SWOT analysis. That stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Applied to hiring, you're looking for the applicant's perceived strengths and weaknesses and how it aligns with your team. In terms of opportunities and threats, you need to examine how you can best utilize this person for your department, organization, objectives or your objectives as it relates to the external opportunities or threats. In short, in building your team, how can this person complement your efforts and contribute to what you've determined success should look like? Do they have the skills to grow and expand beyond the role? Ideally, you should hire someone who can perform the role but has the capacity and will grow to take on more. Campaigns and state parties often have to do more with less, and you need a multi-dimensional player who can handle varying tasks. Finally, well, not finally, actually, can the person work with your team? This is critical. The person you hire on top of having the requisite skills needs to be a team player. There's nothing worse than a team killer who disrupts the energy and thus creates problems for you as a manager because they don't fit in with the team or organization structure. I generally like a panel interview after I've met with the applicant to determine how well do they do in the group setting and to gauge how the existing team feels about the applicant. Can they work within the culture? Choose wisely. As I stated previously, a bad hire can be an immense distraction and can take away from your objectives. What qualifications do they have outside the job description? I consider those skills. So you have to ask what qualifications they have outside the job description. I consider skills outside the job description to be a bonus. It's one more tool that you can have in your toolbox when the applicant is capable of more or brings a unique skill to the role. Also, make sure you refer to your interview notes and compare each person's responses. Remember to refer to your notes, because if you interview a great deal of people, you can compare them more objectively and at least apply this process fairly. Also examine how their professional references responded. I think references can be quite telling in conjunction with the resume, cover letter, and the interview. Any and all information helps you make the best informed decision when you look to fill this role. Also, did they pass the background check? I cannot emphasize this more. Some mechanism for background check should be implemented. Because of the nature of our work, an embarrassing hire or a person with a questionable background can derail your organization. It could be a bad news story that creates a distraction, or think about those campaign horror stories when you've heard about a person siphoning money from the committee. Perhaps the background check would elicit that information out before bringing a person on who may adversely impact the organization. Establishing a team culture should be a careful and deliberate process. It starts with the job description and carries over into the interview. You should clearly project the type of person you're looking for. Say it, be it. You just can't say the culture is one way. You truly have to be the culture that you profess. It's important for effective management, engagement, and ensuring that new hire acclimates well to the organization and hits the ground running. Engage culture through diversity and inclusion. The diversity of hires is critical as it helps inform you of other perspectives and helps you identify with a broader audience. Diversity and inclusion go hand in hand and are mutually hand in hand. No one should strive for diversity. Not only should you strive for diversity for the sake of the team dynamic and the greater culture as a whole, it is important to foster an environment that makes people feel included. Everyone wants to be part of something. It's your job to make sure that it happens. Be welcoming. You are the first person they would have interacted with, and you set the tone for the rest of the organization. Personalize the experience. A personalized experience helps the onboarding process and helps the new hire embrace the culture and the values of the organization. And then also there's recruitment strategies. Sorry, folks, I left off one point. In terms of recruitment strategies, they should reflect the kind of person the organization wants to attract. When recruiting, you should always actively think about your culture and the type of people you want to build on what currently exists. So in talking performance reviews, this is one of my favorite parts. As I'm sure you've experienced, an angry manager storms into your office and states how poorly a staffer is doing and how it's not working out. The real question is, have you told that staffer what they're doing wrong? How can we expect someone to improve if they aren't aware of what they're doing wrong? Many managers have the tendency to avoid having those tough conversations with their staff as it relates to performance, often allowing the performance issue to linger on until it reaches a point of no return. I once had a former boss tell me, it's your responsibility to let staff know how they're doing. I 100% agree with that, and if we're going to be effective managers, we have to let staff know how they're doing. And remember, a performance review is more than just dinging or celebrating a staffer. It's really just feedback. Feedback needs to be honest, objective, and clear-cut. Again, how can a staffer improve if you never tell them what they're doing well or not so well? You do yourself as a manager a disservice when you do not effectively communicate with your staff. Many performance issues are preventable if you arm your staff with the information or tools they need to do their job. And from a managerial perspective, if there are performance issues, you've now had the opportunity to properly document the issues and provide that person with the opportunity to improve. If the employee's performance does not improve, at least you were fair and gave the person the opportunity to change their circumstances. Have a time to conduct performance reviews. Without a set time frame, reviews will get pushed back and may never happen. This allows you to properly prepare, approach the process objectively. Shouldn't be viewed as a chore, but a chance to sit down with your staffer and have a frank discussion. I guarantee you the staffer wants to know how they're doing. One basketball analogy I like to refer to is, let's say NBA All-Star LeBron James of the Miami Heat during the NBA Finals of Game 7 goes on a shooting streak in which out of 3 out of 4 quarters he scores 100 points, single-handedly carrying his team. In the fourth quarter, though, he hits a proverbial wall and scores no points. The Heat go into overtime, and another lesser-known teammate on the Heat scores a clutch shot, winning the game. We only remember the person who shot the last shot and somehow forgot LeBron scored 100 points and put the team in position to win the championships. This is called the recency effect. The recency effect is a psychological term, and according to dictionary.com, is the phenomenon that when people are asked to recall any order of items on a list, those that come to mind are the things that just happened recently. So, and to that, I once had a boss tell me you're only good as your last performance. Well, is that really fair? As managers, we have to remember to strive to be objective and focus on the defined review period in which you're judging the staff's work. You just can't remember yesterday. We are all susceptible to focusing on what just happened as opposed to the body of work during the defined time frame. Another thing about performance, a pat on the back goes a long way, and many times we don't hear from our boss unless something went wrong. According to a survey by Dan Schwabel and as seen in Forbes, the data suggests that unlike baby boomers who want their objectives and to be left alone to execute, Generation Y wants an almost constant stream of feedback. 80% of millennials said they want regular feedback from the managers, and 75% yearn for mentors. The data is quite telling, particularly for younger workers. Also, in lieu of pay, recognition can go a long way and keep morale higher than normal. A component of the review process is to address what do they want to do or where they want to go. This is important for 2 reasons for younger staffers or staffers in general. You can help align their skills around what they enjoy doing, which makes the role more fulfilling and boasts a greater return on investment for you, the culture, and the organization. Conversely, if you find they don't enjoy some aspects of the role, you can figure out the best way to leverage their contributions to your overall objectives and make better use of their contributions. Approaching performance reviews as a thoughtful and collaborative process helps take the negativity out of the process. And finally, you show that you care enough about them, that you thought enough to focus on where they want to go in life or in their professional career. This helps the team dynamic and fosters loyalty, which is priceless. So developing your performance review. Designing and revamping your performance review should be a deliberative process. This should capture the needs and expectations of both employees and managers. The performance review should also capture the values of the organization so everyone has buy-in. As we all know, oftentimes people dread performance reviews. To mitigate those feelings, make sure everyone is included in the process. This includes training staff on its importance, its purpose, why the performance review is set up the way it is. Getting everyone on the same page and the purpose of the performance review takes a lot of negativity out of the process. This also helps in rolling out the performance review and also minimizes resistance to change or people who are used to doing it the old way. Performance review doesn't have to be a thesis. It should just be right-sized for the organization, defined time frame you have to complete it and what you're ultimately trying to accomplish. And just in general, I have some general guidelines and tips for creating your performance review or performance review system. Too much criteria to evaluate. Again, don't make a review that's overly broad with too much criteria to evaluate. This is when a well-written job description comes back into play. Depending on how well you wrote it in the first place, it helps you create the evaluation of that person. Non-relevant criteria. Referring to a job description keeps the focus on position requirements and core competencies. Adding more than what's necessary is overkill. One form fits all, well, really that's not the case. When crafting a performance review, one form won't necessarily work for everyone as each role is unique. I suggest having a few customizable fields or blank areas where you can address the unique characteristics of the position on the review. This way you can personalize the process and make it more relevant for you and your employee. Lack of comments. The review should not just be a series of scores without comments. The whole point of the review is to let the employee know how they're doing. If they're doing well, they should know why they're doing well. And conversely, if they're not meeting muster, they should also know why. Comments are that opportunity to clearly articulate and provide the employee with the feedback they need to succeed. Some other items to consider. Adding a room for improvement. Everyone can improve, even if they're a top performer. You should identify where you think they need to grow. This can be applied to those who aren't doing well or for those who would benefit from professional development. This section should not be viewed as negative. You can talk about trainings that you think will get the employee to the next level, and it fosters a conversation about where they want to go in their career. Also, use of metrics. Metrics are black and white and are about as objective as you can get. If a position calls for it, make sure you incorporate metrics into the review, as it's much easier to measure as it relates to goal setting and accomplishments. So just more or less keep it simple. Team dynamics. Balancing an expanding team can be tricky and requires you to follow a careful process. A good team dynamic is invaluable. We all want a team that works well together and making sure that everyone has each other's backs and they're reliable. So as you look to expand and balance your team, think about the dynamic you already have in place and ask yourself the following questions. Does the person fit in? Will the personalities, work styles, and other dynamics align with what you have and what you envision for your team? Building your team should be deliberative again, and just because the applicant has the experience, you need to make sure they have the right demeanor. Will they be good to work with? Some people are excellent but lack the soft skills required for a team dynamic to flourish. You should weigh this carefully and try to determine this during the interview. Will they pull their weight? You want a contributor, not a slacker. Hiring a low performer can wreak havoc on the team dynamic and when other staffers are forced to take on more work outside their position. It can create dissension, drama, and more work for you as you try to manage that imbalance. This can all be prevented if you determine whether the potential hire has the qualities you desire. Will they step up when the situation calls for all hands on deck? The campaign environment can be a stressful one, and it calls for people who rise to the occasion. Egos, individualistic attitudes can cause a team to implode. Make sure during the interview that you find a person who will do what is required to meet the objectives. Of course, you'll need to develop your own questions as you look to expand your team, but this is a great starting point. So, to round out this presentation almost at the end, there were a lot of resources that went into making this presentation. So a great deal of these sites address those topics that were covered today. In addition to the web, you should use each as state leaders to develop the best practices. I encourage collaboration as you all implement, tweak, or overhaul your hiring management processes. Many of you are already doing great things in your respective states, and I know you have a great deal to share that would help your fellow colleagues. I also recommend sharing and posing challenges and questions that you have with each other so a solution can be quickly applied. Finally, refine your processes. I find that small tweaks and improvements greatly help as it relates to hiring and management. The next couple slides are just great resources, and I hope you have a chance to look at them post this presentation. So some of these just detail job description guidelines. The U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission has a great site, a lot of information there. I got hiring do's and don'ts, helpful HR sites, an article talking to performance review mistakes for managers, links referring to hiring, and then how you design a performance review. So hopefully you found this presentation to be helpful. I enjoyed pulling it together, and thank you for having me today. Now we're going to open it up for, questions.
Thanks so much, Bernard. If you have questions about the presentation, you can do so by clicking on the raise my hand icon and we'll get you unmuted, or you can type into the questions box and we will get your questions read. Just wanted to remind you while we have a moment, we'll have evaluations for this webinar that will come to your inbox here right after our webinar wraps. Please use that as an opportunity to give us feedback on this webinar, as well as letting us know about webinar topics that you'd like to see us train on in the future through our Train to Win series. So please do take an opportunity to fill that out when it comes to your inbox. Great. I don't see any questions in the questions queue, and so I will take that to mean this presentation was incredibly thorough. And will also be available to all through our training library, the legacy file. So if you have additional questions or would like to look through it again, please access it there. It'll be in the webinars folder under hiring and management. And if you don't have a login to our training library, you can email me and I'll make sure that you get the link to sign up. Wartel, WARTELJ @dnc.org, and I'll make sure that you get the registration link so that you can get credentials for that. Seeing no additional questions, we want to thank Bernard Coleman, DNC Human Resources Director, for his time and presentation today, and thank you all for joining, and we will see you again on next week's webinar. Thank you.